A new Supreme Commander for the Imperial Guard? Here we have the galaxy's most fancy man on horse, Lord Solar Leontus, taking up the heritage of Macarius to lead the Guard in campaigns anew. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about a fairly big reveal for the Astra Militarum, and potentially the last one that we're going to be getting before the Codex and the models actually start to come out. Last week, Games Workshop, when they previewed the Rogue or Dawn, did say that they were having one last big reveal, and this looks like it's it, the long-rumoured and awaited Lord Solar miniature, and as promised, we appear to have an Imperial noble in the style of Macarius, mounted on a heavily bionic horse. This guy appears to be a new Supreme Commander for the Guard. Kind of feels a little bit akin to what they did with the Sisters of Battle in bringing out Morven Var. He's arguably the highest ranking Guard official around, and as mentioned last week, he does appear to be taking up the footsteps of Lord Solar Macarius, the great Lord Solar who launched the Great Crusade off to the west of the Imperium, conquering 1,000 worlds into the galactic fold, but then in a bit of an Alexander the Great style of affairs, he died shortly after, and much of his conquest fell into ruin and infighting. In Games Workshop's preview article for this, we don't really have a massive amount of lore, and perhaps the details that we do know are pretty much as you might expect for a commander like this. This guy is the new Lord Solar, basically head of the Astra Militarum within the Segmentum Solar, though apparently he is known to lead campaigns beyond his official jurisdiction, his argument being that it's all in the safety of Terra. His full name is Arcadian Leontus, Solar is the title rather than part of his name. And as you might expect for Imperial nobility, despite not being a superhuman space marine, he does make good use of rejuvenant treatments, meaning that he lives far longer than the average mortal in service of mankind. He is basically the very top of the Astra Militarum hierarchy, but doesn't actually seem to be adverse to taking to the battlefield himself when it's necessary. Mounted atop his great and very heavily cybernetically augmented steed Constantin, and in battle he fights with the pistol Sol's Righteous Gaze and the Power Sword Conquest. It does appear that the Righteous Gaze thing is a pistol as opposed to a Bale Eye attack or anything like that. For better or worse, it does look like any speculation about this guy turning out to be Yarick hasn't been borne out. Conquest is most likely the Blade of Conquest, as was a relic from the previous Guard Codex. That was the Power Sword that the previous Lord Solar Macarius fought with, so it kind of makes sense that it might be going back to the person who's entitled to lead the Segmentum, and has him fit in with Imperial history. As for the model itself, I feel like some people are going to like it, a fair few people I suspect aren't going to be the biggest fans. Perhaps one of the initial reactions that I've seen from a few people, and what I thought myself, was that it does look really quite fantasy for a 40k miniature. It's kind of a model that wouldn't be too out of place in Age of Sigmar, basically a clockwork style horse, and kind of subtle technology on the power sword, not that much to be obvious about, but on the other hand, it is basically how I'd expect an Imperial noble to look like. Golden armour and perhaps more sophisticated technology than gets deployed on the front lines. Constantine really does have quite a lot of bionics going on, and they look like they're a lot more fancy than the average guardsman might get. His horse really does look like it's more machine than flesh anymore. It looks like all of those legs are being replaced by bionics, as has one of his eyes, but there are still some horsey bits poking through here and there. He's got a bit of a regal flaming crown thing going on, which looks like it's a bit of a nod to the previous Solar Macarius, making him look like a bit more of a conquering leader as opposed to a general. He is going to stand out quite differently from the rest of the guard forces that he's leading, to be fair. Very much an Imperial noble gracing the ranks of the troops, as opposed to a bit more of a traditional appearance of a general like Creed or his daughter. On the base, it looks like rather than the standard tactical rock, he's standing aboard a ruined Chaos war machine. Maybe that's part of a Chaos Knight or something. I guess that's one way to show that he's being at least somewhat successful in his conquests against the enemies of mankind. We've got a few more shots of the miniature as well. On the right, we've got a look at his pistol, which appears to be holstered. That's quite a potent one by all accounts. And a bit of a better look at that ruined Chaos War Machine base. Not sure if that's directly supposed to be something from existing kits, maybe something like part of a Chaos Knight or a Titan or something. But whatever it is, it doesn't look like it's going to be in the service of the Dark Gods anymore. There's also a look at the other side of the model from the short video that they made for him. In that one you can see that Constantine has at least one good eye working, and only has the one that's been made into a bionic eye. As kind of teased on the back of that box set when they did the reveal video, the Lord Solar does indeed grace the cover of the limited edition Codex. We don't yet know whether or not this is going to be the same artwork as the standard Guard Codex, or whether that's going to be something else. It does look with him very cool, horse rearing up to lead a charge against the enemies of mankind, no doubt. This really does seem to be more of a picture of the Lord Solar than the Guard in general, though. Maybe not really that representative, with a few regal banners and things in the background, as opposed to any Guard tanks or units. I'd guess that there'd probably be a different artwork for the cover of the Guard Codex, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that front. Sometimes the limited edition art is different to the standard Codex, sometimes it is the same. I also thought it would be interesting to put a side by side of the previous Solar Macarius versus this guy. I feel like you can definitely see some of the design similarities there. Very much a white and gold palette as he has at the moment, and some very nice bold use of the Imperial Aquila across the armour. Finally, of course, we do have some leaked rules as well. Like the rest of these come from Mordian Glory's big leak compilation. I'll link the source down in the comments below, certainly a great guard channel that I recommend checking out. Games Workshop did give us a single rules teaser in the preview, which basically confirmed part of this, which does up the credibility of the rest of the league. Apparently this chap is going to be an 180 points Cavalry Supreme Commander, so that should mean he should be really easy to field for just about any guard regiment. It means that you can have him basically command point free in a different detachment. His stat line is relatively impressive, though still feels a bit more like a mortal than some sort of great big Space Marine leader who's going to go around just destroying everything. He's got a 12-inch move, hits on 2s, strength 6 and toughness 4, 8 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 10, and a 3+ save with a 4+ invul. I think in one of the earlier leaks they mentioned that he might half incoming damage, but that seems to be absent in the later one. I really wouldn't be too surprised to see him have some sort of extra durability rule on top of all that though. I feel like they could easily give something to represent the horse extensive bionics maybe, something like a 5+ feel no pain, or something like a -1 damage or half damage, and it wouldn't be too much. Really, it does seem that the reason to include him is more his command abilities than his combat, though he isn't too bad in a scrap if he gets there. First up, he's got Captain and Lieutenant rules basically amalgamated into one, a 6-inch aura of reroll 1s to hit and wound for both core units, so that is infantry and things like sentinels as well. Sorry, slight typo on the slide there. Plus nearby infantry characters as well. Seems nice enough to have in the ranks, could maybe be quite nice alongside some rough riders. They do seem like some pretty potent core damage dealers, and of course he's got the cavalry stat line to keep up with them. On top of that, you get to nominate one unit in the command phase, so basically chapter master style rerolls, 4 rerolls to hit whether it's core or not, but if you do select a core unit, they get 4 rerolls to wound as well. That's quite a nice buff to be honest, and it sounds like it's pretty useful regardless of what you target it on. 4 rerolls to hit is pretty potent on something that isn't core. You could be having a Rogue or Dawn battle tank with 4 rerolls, or maybe even something like a Baneblade, but then getting the hits and the wound rerolls is pretty nice. Again, sounds pretty awesome on rough riders, but I'm sure something like Kazakin or Sentinels or something would also get a lot of value. Then he also knows 3 different orders, and knows all 3 variants, including tank orders apparently, so to be honest, this guy does seem to have like a surprising amount of value just for literally commanding your battle tanks. He could be galloping alongside and tell them to increase their damage, and plus give 1 full rerolls to hit as well. Then and finally for his buffing abilities, there's this collegiate Astralex rule, and this one is the one that's previewed by Games Workshop and does tie in basically exactly with the league. Basically it's a rule that allows you to swap out a secondary objective after the opponent has revealed theirs, or if you choose not to, then you gain a command point instead. In general, I think the usual idea would be that you just want to pick the secondary objectives that you most want before the game. I feel like the majority of the time there isn't going to be too much value in trying to do a reactive counterpick to your opponent, but occasionally, if their secondary choice has really made them commit to one strategy, then perhaps swapping out a secondary could actually give you a decent counter and might earn you a victory point or two compared with what you would have picked otherwise. It's all maybe a bit theoretical and high level though. I think if you just saw this basically as a free command point with the option to do something weird if it made sense, then it's still very good value and certainly makes him a bit more attractive. Finally, he's got his combat stats, and that Soul's Righteous Gaze pistol is a 12-inch pistol with 2 shots at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 3, so that's a fairly potent anti-tank little punch there. I'm not exactly sure what sort of rounds that thing's firing, but it seems to be the equivalent of a relic plasma pistol for other factions. And then of course we've got the Blade of Conquest, a strength 6, AP -3 and damage 2. A pretty reasonable combat stat line, though he's not going to be cleaving apart battle tanks like that. I do wonder if there might be a few more combat buffing type rules that we haven't seen yet. Say for example the Rough Riders were rumoured to have a +2 strength on the charge. Given that this guy's a cavalry model, I wouldn't be too surprised if he might pick that up as well. That way he could be swinging with strength 8 on the charge as well. With 6 attacks hitting on 2s, you are going to do some pretty decent damage, at least to medium infantry. Overall, if you do wind up getting all that for 180 points, it does seem like it could be a very tempting include. The amount of command damage dealing to increase shooting is pretty good in itself, and having a potent guard melee threat in the list doesn't seem bad either. Let me know what you think though. Would you be tempted to have Mr. Leontus leading your army if he does happen to have these rules when the Codex drops? So anyway, a pretty exciting guard model. Let me know what you think of the model and whether or not he works for you alongside the guard, or whether you would have preferred something a bit more military-esque. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be keeping up the regular guard content and more general 40k news stuff. I do tend to post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that links down in the video description if you want to help keep them coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.